guys! In this video I just want to share with you what I spent on 1 month in traveling in Indonesia on a budget. So let's get into it. The way my budget works is I've got 4 different categories. Accommodation, I've been here for about 15 minutes and I'm really impressed so far. Food, transport, and extras. And I am using this format for all of the countries I'm going to and just putting every spending in so that I can have the best idea of what I'm spending, where I'm spending that money, and how much it's all costing. So for accommodation, I started with a very low budget of $14 a night, which I quickly changed to $17 a night because I realized how important it was for me to have a little bit of a better accommodation.
That smells really bad.
Because after a whole day of just being out in the 30 degrees to 40 degrees heat and walking around and seeing things, you actually get really tired and you want to come back to something that's actually comfortable. I actually did really well for accommodation, better than I thought I did. I spent an average of $14.63 per night in the month that I was there, and a total of $511.59. The most I spent on an accommodation was $21, which I did in Gili Air, but honestly it was super worth it for me because I had such a great week there. We had breakfast included and there was a lot of activities. I met a lot of people and just everything was kept clean and tidy. It was great. It was tipsy-turvy. In terms of hostels in Indonesia, they're amazing. Most of them have curtains, which is such a game changer because you actually feel like you're in your own little private cocoon. And they've got AC. A lot of the times there's breakfast included. At least I always looked for that because that saved a lot of money for me going into food. And yeah, there's normally activities and it's a great place to meet like-minded people really, and also traveling. Alright, so with food, I had a budget of $14 per day and I stuck to it pretty well. I ended up doing $9.92 on average per day and a total of $362.02 in the 37 days that I was there. In terms of food, it was really difficult in some areas that were quite touristy to find the local warungs. A warung is basically a family-owned small restaurants for locals and run by locals, and that is where you can find the best prices and also the best food. Back here. For me, it was also very different because I'm vegetarian, so I could only really have nasi goreng, which is fried rice, and mie goreng, which is fried noodles. And so that became a little bit repetitive after a while, just so you know if you're a vegetarian. But that is also the cheapest meals I could find. The cheapest I ever found was 15K, which is $1.50. And the most expensive, well, that you can find crazy amounts. But I would never go for a nasi goreng or a mie goreng that was more than 40K. Something to consider, the portions are quite small. So if you're someone who eats a lot, then you might want to consider putting a bit more in the budget to have maybe 2 meals. I have to admit that portion quite small. I wanted to touch up on the food safety in Indonesia because there's a lot of talks about people being very worried about eating there, and honestly it's not bad at all.
Really yum. It's a perfect snack. I didn't want something too big anyway.
I never got sick in Indonesia.
Just so I don't starve to death in a waterfall. Not a good idea.
Also ice. I had ice drinks all the time and I never got sick, but then again that's a risk that I was willing to take, so it's up to you. But in my experience, ice was all good. A cost you might want to consider to add in your budget is alcohol. I barely drank alcohol in Indonesia, maybe twice. Just because I was a solo female traveler and I didn't feel comfortable being in a situation or putting myself in a situation where I couldn't control. So that was my personal decision, but if you want to spend some money on alcohol, definitely add on to that, because alcohol is not cheap. I mean, it is cheaper than probably back in your country, but it isn't cheap if you compare it to all the prices in Indonesia. Transport is the one category that always surprises me, because it's always one of the most expensive ones, even in countries where you think it's going to be cheap. Simply because there are always things in transports that you don't expect you're going to take, and you have to take them, and they just turn out to be more than you thought. The transports that I took in Indonesia were scooters, cars, ferries, and I hired also a scooter, and that includes having to pay for fuel, which is honestly not a lot. I had budgeted $1,428 and I ended up spending $1,508, so a whole $100 more, which is quite a bit for Indonesia, I reckon. Yeah, so transport can be more expensive for a solo traveler as well if you're having to take a car, because most of the time you're paying for the whole car, not per person. So that can be a bit tricky as a solo traveler. In terms of safety in the transport, I felt very safe. I can tell you this as a woman, as a solo traveler, I felt safe by going by myself on scooters really far away to like waterfalls, or take 2-hour cars just by myself with this Indonesian man, and it was all good. So no problem with that in Indonesia. Again, that is my experience only. Alright, moving on to the last category, which is extras. Extras is by far the most expensive category I have, that basically constitutes half of my spendings in Indonesia. Extras, I included anything from the laundry, to SIM cards, to activities, entrance fees, to waterfalls, to temples. And by activities, I mean my activities that were quite expensive.
I got told to come to Nusa Lembongan to do some diving, so that's what I'm doing now.
I'm gonna do probably what's the most exciting thing I've done so far, and that's a jungle trek, 3 days, 2 nights.
My total of extras was $1,655. Okay, it sounds like a crazy amount of money, but in that, keep in mind that I did my certificate in diving, my open water certificate, and that was $600 something, and then I did dives, about 4 dives, which was $260. All in all, if you are trying to get into diving, that's you can count in a whole $1,000 for that. But guys, it's super worth it. The diving for me was super worth it. If you're not interested in it, then that's good for you, because it means you get to save some more money. And then the other big chunk of money in that for me was my jungle trek, which was about $380. So if you're not counting these 2 big activities that I did, honestly, in extras it's not that much. It's about $600. That all honestly adds up with laundry. If I broke my sunglasses, so I had to buy new ones. I bought myself a pair of pants, a sarong. So yeah, all those things just add up. Sunscreen, I mean, yeah. And all the entrance fees to islands really does add up in the end. So there you go. So the final total of my whole trip in Indonesia for a month was $4,037.36, which was quite a lot more than I had planned. So my final thoughts are: stick to warungs for eating, because A, they're the best food, they're cheapest, and you're gonna actually experience local food.
Yeah, that's coconut water.
Indonesia as a whole, for a solo female traveler or just a solo traveler, is super safe. I mean, I never felt like I was in any situation where I could be harmed or anything. And honestly, the most harmful thing that can happen to you is be ripped off in activities or in transport, things like that. Whereas where I got ripped off. But that is again just speaking from my experience and the other females that I met in my travels in Indonesia. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a bit different than my other ones. Let me know if you liked it or not. And I will see you in my next adventure. Terima kasih, sampai jumpa!